Wealth Attraction Research. WAR. War. Measuring wealth. Wealth Attraction Research. War. WAR. Measuring wealth. You're listening to Wealth Attraction Research, presented by Hakeem Alibokis Alexander on Spreaker, Social Podcasting, and Wisdom Social Audio Inc., presented for World Reading Club in association with ExercisingYourMind.com and UniquilibriuM. This edition's reading focus comes to us from How Money Works and the Little Book of Economics. I'm going to start off first with the book How Money Works and the section Smoothing Earnings, and then finish it off with Measuring Wealth, or The Economy Can Be Counted, in the Little Book of Economics, and maybe some excerpt from one of my Robert Kiyosaki books, but we'll see. It is 1:34, started about a minute ago, 1:33, so I only have 1 hour. Let's get it done, this alchemy. The more we know of the spells, the more magic we can create. How Money Works, Smoothing Earnings. This is a business practice aimed at reducing volatility in company income and reported profit. Smoothing involves the use of accounting techniques to limit fluctuations in a company's earnings. That doesn't sound just a little bit shady. How it works. Investors like to see companies demonstrate a steady increase in income and profits over time, rather than large fluctuations between income in good and bad years. It is possible for companies to smooth their earnings to avoid these sorts of large fluctuations. For example, managers can manipulate figures by choosing when to make provision, that is, set aside money, for large expenses, rather than making large investments, paying back loans, or making provisions for big costs in a year in which income has been low. They can instead make provision for those costs in a subsequent year, when the company's income has increased. Smoothing earnings is generally a legal and legitimate practice, and is a way of spreading profits over a number of years. By using this accounting practice, the financial statements of a company will show regular and steady growth, which encourages people to invest in it. However, it can also be used illegally, and to disguise or hide losses and encourage investors to buy into a company that is insolvent. Need to know. Making provision, the setting aside of money for future expenses or potential liabilities. Balance sheet, a company's income, expenditure, assets, capital reserves, and liabilities. Profit and loss account, a financial statement showing a company's net profit or loss in a given period of 6 to 12 months. Volatility, the ups and downs of income or reported profits. Let's take a look at volatile earnings. So this is interesting, right? I mean, it says, here's what I find fascinating. It says, smoothing involves the use of accounting techniques, right, or accounting practices to limit fluctuations in a company's earnings. Already sounded shady from the beginning, right? Uh, rather than uh, report income like the provisions, managers can manipulate figures by choosing when to make provisions. All right, volatile earnings. Company A does not keep money in reserve to pay for large expenses or to cover its running costs in case of a downturn in profits. It is therefore more vulnerable to fluctuations in its income. In good times, a company spends. Profits are higher than anticipated, so the company spends money on new equipment, staff bonuses, and advertising. It does not keep any money in reserve. Slump. Company has no reserve. The company suffers an unexpected downturn in profits, but has no money set aside. It may struggle to meet its running costs and will be less attractive to investors. So this is that smoothing earnings practices. This image here is like a hill and a trough, or like a wave, like a sine wave, except a little bit more flat on the top. Let's see. Oh, cool. We've got some controversy here. Famous accounting scandals. Let's take a look at that. Well, before we do that, I'm gonna look at we looked at volatile earnings. Let's look at smoother earnings. Smoother earnings. Company B smooths its earnings by setting money aside during profitable years to use at a later date. For example, to repay a loan or cover any unexpected large expenses. The figures are managed. Income is higher than usual, so the extra revenue is stockpiled and then pushed on to the following year. Profits therefore appear to be steadily increasing. Yeah, I don't know about this smoothing earnings. It's a very questionable practice. Even though here they say that it's generally legal and legitimate, there's nothing that seems ethical about it. It's just a fucking trick of finances and economics. All right. We're not managing profits, we're managing a business, says Jack Welch. Warning. Reading a company's financial statement does not always give the full picture. Some of the world's biggest corporate finance scandals have involved hidden losses, loans made to look like income, and misstated profits to make the company in question appear solvent when it is not. So let's look at those famous accounting scandals. Even large, well-known companies can be guilty of manipulating their profit and loss accounts. I love how they word this, like even large, well-known companies, as if those aren't the ones that are always guilty of manipulating their profit accounts. They're like, oh, even large, well-known companies, like they're not the ones that do it all the time. It should say something like mostly large, well-known companies are guilty of manipulating their profit and loss accounts. But back to the printed word. Even large, well-known companies can be guilty of manipulating their profit and loss accounts. The biggest scandals of recent years included that of Enron, at the time, which was one of the top 7 U.S. companies. So 2001, Enron 2001. Shareholders in this large U.S. company lost a combined $74 billion. When the company collapsed, accountants found that the balance sheet had huge hidden debts that had not been declared. WorldCom 2006. This communications company appeared to have far more assets than it actually owned, thanks to false entries detailing sales that never existed. It may have inflated its assets by as much as $11 billion. Bernie Madoff 2008. Investors were paid returns out of their own money, and the business was only sustained by new investors being recruited. Investors in the scheme lost around $65 billion. And Lehman Brothers, 2008. This investment bank, founded in 1850, had $50 billion of losses in the form of worthless assets on its balance sheet. It went bankrupt, a major factor in the global financial crisis. Y'all know about that, 2008. Oh, good. The next section in here is going to be one of my favorite, which is cash flow, but not just yet in how money works. Moving on, the little book of economics. Another good section, I think here. It's the economy can be counted, measuring wealth. Nice, there's a little glyph of an abacus in the corner. Should be interesting. Let's take a look. In context, focus, economic methods. Key thinker, William Petty, 1623 to 1687. Before, in 1620, English scientist Francis Bacon argues for a new approach to science based on the collection of facts. So a new approach to science based on the collection of facts. After 1696, English statistician Gregory King writes his great statistical survey of England's population. 1930s, Australian economist Colin Clark invents the idea of gross national product, or GNP. 1934, Russian-U.S. economist Simon Kuznets develops modern national income accounting methods. In 1950s, British economist Richard Stone introduces balanced, double-entry national accounting. Oh, why does all of this shit seem so shady? All right. All right, there's a little flow chart here. Should I read that? All right, let's see. Wealth includes people as well as property. Both population and a typical person's average expenditure can be estimated. Multiplying average expenditure by the population gives the national income. Deducting an estimated amount for rents and profits leaves a sum for the total worth of labor. The economy can be counted. All right. So wealth includes people as well as property. Both population and a typical person's average expenditures can be estimated. Multiplying average expenditures by the population gives the national income, and deducting an estimated amount for rents and profits leaves a sum for the total worth of labor. The economy can be counted. All right. Let's see what more details we can flesh out from that. Today, we take it for granted that the economy can be measured and its expansions and contractions accurately quantified, so they say. But this was not always the case. The idea of measuring the economy dates back to the 1670s and the pioneering work of English scientist William Petty. Okay, his name is not inspiring much confidence right now. His insight was to apply the new empirical methods of science to financial and political affairs, to use real-world data rather than relying on logical reasoning. He decided to... wait a minute. Did I just read that? How... to use real-world data rather than relying on logical reason? Why do they have to be excluded? Why can't you use real-world data and logic? Okay. He decided to express himself only in terms of number, weight, or measure. This approach helped form the basis of the discipline that would become known as economics. In his 1671 to 1672 book, Political Arithmetic, Petty used real data to show that, contrary to popular belief, England was wealthier than ever. One of his groundbreaking decisions was to include the value of labor, as well as land and capital. Although Petty's figures are open to dispute, there is no doubting the effectiveness of his basic idea. His calculations included population size, personal spending, wages per person, the value of rents, and others. He then multiplied these figures to give a total figure for the nation's total wealth, creating accounts for an entire nation. Similar methods were developed in France by Pierre de Bois-Guilbert from 1646, or he lived from 1646 to 1714, and Sebastian Le Prestre from 1633 to 1707. In England, Gregory King, 1648 to 1712, analyzed the economies and populations of England, Holland, and France. He calculated that none had the finances to continue the war they were then engaged in, the 9 Years' War, beyond 1698. His figures might have been correct because the war ended in 1697. Measures of progress. Statistics are now at the heart of economics. Today, economists generally measure gross domestic product, that's GDP, the total value of all the goods and services exchanged for money within a country in a particular period, usually for a year. However, there is still no definitive way of calculating national accounts, although efforts have been made to standardize methods. Economists have now begun to broaden the measurement of prosperity. They have formulated new measures such as the Genuine Progress Indicator, or GPI, which includes adjustments for income distribution, crime, pollution, and the Happy Planet Index, HPI. The fuck is that? A measure of human well-being and environmental impact. The Happy Planet Index. This is, that reminds me of, and I'm actually going to get back on it. There's a simulation game online called Nation States, and they have ridiculous categories like this. Happy Planet Index, a measure of human well-being and environmental impact. All right, I mean, it sounds funny, but maybe it's a good thing. I think it really more is a title that tries to make it sound like they actually give a shit about what's going on the planet. The Battle of La Hogue was fought in 1692 during the 9 Years' War. English statistician Gregory King calculated how long each country involved could afford to fight, which was estimated, as I read before, it couldn't go beyond 1698. He might have been right because the war ended in 1697. All right, focus. The key thinker, William Petty. Born in 1623 to a humble family in Hampshire, England, William Petty lived through the English Civil War and rose to high positions in both the Commonwealth government and the restored monarchy. Might I point out, folks, that I live in Virginia, which is known as the Commonwealth of Virginia, with names of places like First Landing. All right, so he lived in both the Commonwealth, right. So he rose to high positions, which is William Petty, both the Commonwealth government and then the restored monarchy. As a young man, he worked for the English political philosopher Thomas Hobbes in Holland. After returning to England, he taught economy at Oxford University. A great believer in the new science, he found universities uninspiring, so he left for Ireland, where he made a monumental land survey of the entire country. In the 1660s, he returned to England and began the work on economics for which he is now known. Did you guys know him before, William Petty? No? Yes? No? I was today years old, William Petty. For the remainder of his life, he moved between Ireland and England, both physically and in the focus of his work. Petty is regarded as one of the first great political economists. He died in 1687, age 64. It makes me wonder where the word petty came from. You think he's an economist dealing with money, and his name is Petty. I don't know. Let's see. What's the origin of the word? Origin of the word petty. The etymology says the adjective is derived from Middle English, P-E-T-I, petty, or P-E-T-Y, petty, little, small, minor, and other forms from Anglo-Norman petite. Oh yeah, that's right. French. Why did I think of that? Middle French, petite, and Old French, petit, petite, petite. Young, little, small, inferior, insignificant. Modern French, petite, and ultimately of imitative origin. Well, it would have been fun that's not where we get that modern day from. It's petty, small, little. All right, that was the very short section, Measuring Wealth. The economy can be counted, from the little book of economics. Before that was a section about that shady accounting practice called smoothing earnings, from How Money Works. And, well, I don't think it's their opinion in the book that it's a shady accounting practice. They say that it's generally legal and legitimate, but nothing about it sounds okay to me. And, oh yeah, see what we got here. It seems I left some of those other ones outside, but I have, from this time, 30 minutes. I wonder if I should take it all. I want to put in a different section the work of Adam Smith, which seems to be devoid of some of all of this nonsense that has been derived from his works. Specifically, the next section that I have in there is chapter 5, which is of the real and nominal price of commodities, or of their price in labor and their price in money. I'll do that coming up next, maybe right before my meeting at 3 o'clock, or maybe right after. It should only be an hour, so we'll see how long it takes me to get this done. All right, you've been listening to Wealth Attraction Research, WAR. It's War Measuring Wealth, from both How Money Works and the Little Book of Economics, presented by Hakeem Alibokas Alexander on Wisdom Social Audio Inc. and Spreaker Social Podcasting, presented for World Reading Club in association with UniquilibriuM and ExercisingYourMind.com.